Forward Focus Thursday. Today, under an idea from Dr. Joseph Nathaniel Cousin, who is with us right now, the pastor of Allen Temple AME Church in Woodstock, Georgia. When we come together and talk about issues that affect the church, and not just the church, but affect us all. So we hope that you're able to access this. And we're thankful for the very fine people of Allen Temple. I want to get that out the way before we begin with thank you, Brother Lavender, who works in terms of making sure the IT is correct, Reverend Pace, who is there for support, and Sister Frey. With this being said, I'm blessed to be with my family. I've said Dr. Joseph Cousin, who's the pastor, and our father, Bishop Philip R. Cousin Sr., who is the 96th elected and consecrated bishop of the AME Church. He gives us insight for the backstory of some of these issues, and it helps us put things in context. Before we begin, get some introductions out the way. Joe, how are things going in Georgia?
Going well, just in the middle of annual conference season. So we'll be in conference again next week down in Columbus, and just here. Weather changes every day. It seemed like it was 80 yesterday, give or take, and today it's about 50 something. Sunny yesterday, cold, a little cooler, and overcast today. So just the usual. Still enjoy life.
Amen. Daddy, how are you doing today?
Well, when Joe mentioned the weather, we can't mention the weather. It was 40 and 50. Tomorrow it's supposed to be snowstorm, and next day back up to 50, 30s and 40s. But everything else is fine. The weather patterns are really changing. Climate control and climate damage, is really a fact. It is a fact. I think we have experienced the warmest March in the history of 12 states in the United States. The warmest March.
That's global warming, Dad.
Global warming, global warming is February. The warmest February.
Mm-hmm.
And that's global warming.
Yeah.
That's climate control. How do you handle it? What do you do? If it's bad with the climate, how is it with the people, Lord?
That's what we're going to discuss today. Amen. So today's discussion deals with self-care, mental health, pertaining to those in ministry. And I think this should be applied across the board for each and every person. If you see the Allen Temple post, please hit it, share it on your page so that others may benefit from it. Last month, during our midwinter meeting, we had a moment at the end of our meeting where awards were given to those persons that needed a moment, a sabbatical. Some needed a holiday based upon information that was shared through a grant that was done for 2 years with, we were out of the church. We were able to have Thursday sessions in the 2nd Episcopal District that dealt with self-care, the wounded healer, the wounded servant, being able to deal with that, being in the new place within our setting of COVID. Coming out of COVID, we see that there are some post-stress things that still need to be addressed that have never been addressed as it pertains to clergy self-care. I think, Joe, you was mentioning before we got on that our father was a worker and was really late in his ministry. They really started to take vacations to find the joy, the value. I noticed Daddy would enjoy the cruise that he would take in August. And in one district, the whole month of August was taken off for preachers to go and to have a vacation. It was understood within that Episcopal district. I believe it was the 1st Episcopal district. The month of August was vacation month, which other districts did not do.
And I still
think it's a novel thing.
my time in the first district, I still never took a whole month off because I was afraid of what I was going to find when I got back.
Yeah, and so this is we have here. How do you deal with your wounds? And before we begin, we pray for those who are unable to be with us. Pray for our brother Stephen, the pastor of Trinity AME Church in Kansas City, Kansas, for his wife, for the recent passing of their son, Joel Arthur Cousin, 27 years old. And, you know, in terms of how do you deal with that? And so much that a pastor has to go through, that it is easier to hate the work that you're called to do and resent the people you're called to lead when you have so much on you that you're unable to express. And a couple of things you do, you can fight, you can run, or you can freeze. So with this, you know, we want to be able to get beyond this and to deal with this. Let's set this in context. For a long time, it was understood pastors did not take vacations or did not need vacations because of the expectations, or better yet, persons would say things to you like, what do you need a vacation for? You don't really work.
You only work one day a week.
Only work one day a week. The house is provided for you. We pay your bills. We provide everything in the parsonage. You just show up on Sunday morning.
All you have to do is prepare a 15-minute sermon each week. How hard is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can we jump right in, Mike?
Go right ahead.
So here's the problem. Problem becomes this. I'm at a church now that is very, and I'm not just saying this because I'm the pastor here. I'm being completely transparent. Alan Temple is very understanding. This church and the members and the stewards and trustees and officers and ministerial staff, everyone is truly understanding of what I have to do when I have to take time off, when I take time off. And they are great about it. I mean, tremendous about it, because the leadership is so good. But I have been places and seen other places from friends and even family members where they pastored, where if you took a vacation, you were called lazy. Or if you took even just a simple vacation, you were avoiding or dodging your work, or you weren't serious, just a simple vacation. And I think it got ingrained into people's memories or into their minds that if you take a vacation as a pastor, then you're lazy, or you're not working that hard, or you're not doing that much. And that's just not true at all. And as a result, we burned ourselves out. And the church is like this. Dad, you know this, and Mike, you know this. And I tell members of the church this all the time. If you allow the church will take up every single waking moment you have. There's never a time where there's nothing to do. So if you spend all your time at church, all your time will be spent at church. So as a pastor, or even as a lay person who's actively involved in the church, you got to take some time for yourself. Otherwise, you will spend every waking moment in the church and you'll find nothing left for you.
Amen. So that's the thing where you see in terms of, getting beyond those stigmas and stereotypes. Daddy, what do you have to say about this?
The two things to say, number one, the culture in which we lived said that the preacher was not a full-time thing. It was just a Sunday kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, many of us did not take vacations because we didn't get the money for a vacation. How you gonna take a vacation with no money?
That's a good point. Very good point.
So you stayed. The whole understanding of the role of the clergyman within the framework of the Black church has changed. When I take a look at my life, I was born in a parsonage, grew up in a parsonage, lived in a parsonage all the way up until 1994, when I was in my 60s, because that was the culture in which I lived. And if I had not been elected when I was elected at the General Conference, I don't know where I would have put my family, because we had no home. We lived in a parsonage. I grew up in a parsonage. I kept my family in a parsonage. And now I found out how stupid and how backward I was.
No,
I
you
should have
weren't.
had a house.
Oh,
Should have had a house a long time
You
ago.
weren't stupid or backward, Dad. You were just, you know what you were doing? You were doing just what you saw everybody else do and what you were brought
culture
up
of the
to do.
day.
That's what the day was. So it's not stupid or backwards, Dad. It's just it was the norm.
And it was just, I didn't have my first home that I owned until, as I tell you, 1994.
And Dad, how did you tell me how you came across that one, Dad?
I came across that because I just got tired of living in where the house was no good where they had moved me. And in the Episcopal residence, it just was no good. So I had to have some place. So I said, if all the preachers out here talking about getting housing, how come the bishop can't get housing? And instead of having an Episcopal residence, have my own house. And that's what happened. It just was, the house was run down, needed a roof, needed everything on it. You had to go through, pastors had to go through all kind of hoops to get done when you lived in the parsonage. Bishop usually has to go through all kind of hoops to get things done in the Episcopal residence. That's the way it was. That's the way it was for a long time.
Dad, for a second, and I don't want to get off subject, Mike. I apologize. But for a second,
That's all right.
for a second, Dad, talk about that a little bit, because people think once you're a bishop that you got it made and that everything is there and that money's flowing like a river and all that stuff. But what's it really like, Dad?
Number one, ain't no money flowing like a river. You have your problems, you have your joys. When I was elected a bishop, if you now just listen, my salary was then about $15,000 a year. It got up to $25,000, and now it's only up to $65,000. And how many preachers want to have a salary? How many pastors of major churches want to have salaries of $65,000 to $70,000 a year?
That's not many.
No, not many.
But then again, think about it. That was 1976 when you started 15,000. But now, with getting back to the subject now, I think that adds also, as Dad was speaking about, money for vacation. Persons now are just trying to survive. Listen to this. For the church to survive, our church to survive, we must find a paradigm and not be ashamed to work it to help us be able to express our stress, our doubts, our grief, and our wounds. And so now with this, a lot of persons have been turned off to ministry because of those experiences. I've had the experience of serving at least 10 churches, 10 different churches. And out of those 10, not many have been, you go in having to fight. Sometimes you go, as Lee P. Washington would say, you go in as a visionary and folk view you as a villain. So that adds to that stress that you deal with in terms of being wounded. I think you will hear it often also, Joseph, that one of your charges, that persons, when you would try to express your wounds or express your frustrations, person would tell you, don't take it personal. Quit taking it personal.
Michael, you reminded me of this the other day. I'd forgotten this. This was the most insensitive thing that's ever been done to me at my last church. Someone sent me a Q-tip because there were people that I'm not gonna say it was a fight in church, but there were people that like to fight the preacher. Let's just put it that way. And they sent me a Q-tip in the mail, Dad. I don't even think you know this, Dad. And in the Q-tip, they wrote underneath it, Q-tip, quit taking it personally.
Yeah, I mean that
That's
right
so
there.
insensitive.
So just think about this: how many pastors, okay, how many pastors have had to deal with those wounds? In terms of how do you deal with how many pastors have been hurt by their churches? You know, the pew is not the only one being hurt by the church. How many pastors have been hurt by the church? And there are three wounds. I want to lift up right now, three wounds that pastors receive in terms of psychology. The first wound the pastor receives is one of projection. It's a defense mechanism in which we defend against unconscious impulses. In other words, a bully who projects their own feelings of vulnerability from an abusive father or an abusive spouse or abuse that they received as a weak kid on the playground. A gossiper who likes to whisper about others because they're afraid of people whispering about them. A heart race with prejudice because they don't want to face their own shortcomings, or a person who is feeling shame of their own failure at community when they are viewed for what they truly are. So it's projection. Sometimes we receive wounds from projection of somebody, as Denzel Washington said, it's not that people don't like you, it's just the spirit with you wakes up the demons in them.
Mhm.
So what do you say about that? Projection.
No, I've heard that said before too, that people, when they disagree with you, sometimes it is the God in you, like you said, that arouses a demon in them, and it just really they don't know how to control it.
So you have to remember, in our situation, the only place where a good many of the members had what they considered any kind of control or any kind of leadership or any kind of authority was in the church.
Yes, that's right.
So as a result of that, everything that they wanted to pour out because of their inabilities, they poured out on the pastor so many times. How come you didn't come see my wife, see my mama every day in the week when she was sick? Why didn't you do this?
Every day of the week.
Why didn't you do this? Why didn't that's because they were feeling their sense of authority. Now, and because there was no way in the real world in which they could deal with that kind of authority for a long time. The only place they had that opportunity was in the framework of the church. So who do you beat on in the government at the head of the government? The president. Who do you beat on at the head of the church? The pastor.
So we have a question, Dad. Excellent question. It
Please.
says, who does a pastor talk to when stressed and burned out? Who do we have to talk to?
Now, before Dad addresses that, let's just set the context within our own culture. To admit weakness is to admit that you can't pastor, which means you may be moved. So that's a thing. Now, go ahead, Daddy. Who should we talk to when we feel as if within our system we're supposed to talk to the stewards in terms of having a conversation? If you have, according to Turner, also you talk to your elder, or you talk to the bishop. But even with that is an admission of weakness. Go ahead, Daddy.
Yeah, that, what should happen is at some point there has to be a channel through which those persons who feel any kind of stress can go somewhere, sometimes to a person that they trust, a person who knows, and unload and vet and get some help. The whole thing of clerical coaching now is getting to be a big thing. There maybe we need to develop coaches in our church, in our connection, for those persons who need some kind of psychological and emotional relief.
So, Dad, okay, let's talk about that. So because one thing about Forward Focus Thursday, we try to actually move forward and do new stuff. So, Dad, let's unpack that a little bit. What would that look like, Dad? You said like a clergy coach in the church. What's that look like?
that would have to take a lot. A clergy coach in the church would look something like the health leader in the church now. It'd be somewhere where there could be some persons or some people who, if they can't do it, can recommend you to someone who can do it. But
Yeah.
there has to be a channel through which you ought to be able to move and to relieve and to get some relief for whatever problems are there. Because believe me, there can be a lot of problems that can stir up in the framework of a church. And before you know it, you got chaos in the church that could have been settled if there could have been a time to talk and release and understand.
So,
No,
Go ahead,
that,
Mike.
wait a minute, Joe. For
Yeah,
that,
Mike.
one of the indicators there, when you got to continue to shift clergy around, that could be somewhat of a red flag in terms of dealing with people skills. Now, I've been blessed to serve 10 congregations. The persons that put that label on me said that maybe it's with him, he cannot serve a congregation, where it's the difference, where I've had to go to churches to fix situations
Can-
where persons are abused. Yes,
can I address that real quick?
yes.
Yeah, when you see that in a person, don't think a pastor, don't think, and we're trained to think this, we're conditioned to think this. Don't think that just because you see someone that's been at a church or been at a lot of churches, that it's because they can't stay at a place. No, sometimes as pastors, we have that Liam Neeson mentality in Taken, where we have a specific skill set that is used
Yes.
for a specific situation. And my wife says that about me. She said, every church you've gone to, there's a pattern of what you've had to do at every church. And perhaps God is seeing something in you that allows you to deal with pretty much the same stuff at every church that you deal with. So for you, Mike, that's God helping you work within your skill set. So don't, as you know, don't let anybody diminish that. That's your specific skill set to fix those things in those churches.
So now let's get to point number 2, projection and transference.
Okay.
Ooh. That is when you have a problem with an authority figure because you just have a problem with authority. Sometimes you have a problem with a parent figure, grandparent, teacher, boss. So it's transference. Anyone who's ever been hurt by a pastor, church leader carries that memory in their body, and your very presence as a pastor, church leader can trigger it. Conversely, as a pastor, anytime a pastor has been hurt by a church, just going to another church can trigger those past experiences that can make them somewhat, gun shy to even try, which means in terms of what's the one, freeze and paralysis, afraid to do anything because of what happened at that previous appointment or that previous experience. What say you about that?
No, and it's and Dad can speak to this, and you can speak to this too, Mike. How many of us have ever had, how many pastors, not just us, have ever had true friendships within congregations of their churches?
You don't. I did an article in 1991, Leadership Journal, at our clergy retreat in West Palm Beach, Florida, where it said you be everybody's pastor, but nobody's friend. And so it's sad to see from 91 to now how few your relationships are. What say ye, Bishop Cousin, about that?
I lived by what Polonius said in Hamlet. Be thou friendly, but by no means familiar.
All right. I mean, and that's the thing. So this is the thing that talking about self-care still, right?
Yeah.
So this is the thing that kills a lot of us. As a pastor, if you don't have a hobby or some outlet, something, then you will lose your mind because, again, you're not going to have many relationships in church. I mean, let's just be honest. Most of our relationships in church are superficial and transactional because a person as a pastor, they're going to want something from you. And as pastors, you want something from them. So oftentimes you're not going to find too many genuine friendships if you're lucky to have any at all. So you've got to find somewhere to have outside friendships or something. And that usually takes place when you have hobbies or friend groups. I know, Mike, you like to work out. You work out, you go to the gym, and you've got your crowd there, your group there. You see anybody who knows me knows I shoot pool. I go to the pool hall. I got my buddies over there that know me, aside from just being pastor, cousin, or Reverend Joe, or whatever else I am. And that goes into your self-care as well.
Can I share this experience that when you've been burnt so many times? When I pastored a church in Florida, I just said Mount Hermon. It was always a threat of litigation. It was always drama. And for one annual conference, but at least 2 annual conferences in a row, they would send a rumor that there was a bus coming up from the church to pretty much protest my ministry, but the bus never showed up. When I left that church and went to St. Mark in Milwaukee, there was a bus that came down from Milwaukee to the site my first year there. And person said, Reverend, you didn't acknowledge the bus. I said, so what are you all coming down to protest about? They said, protest? We were coming down to support you. We were happy and proud of what the job you're doing here. Yeah. So I apologized and I said, my previous experiences with buses have not been positive. And, see, in terms of how that even now, when you hear about a bus coming from a church, you say, Lord, what's wrong? When really there's nothing wrong. It's just that something is going, people want to be there with you. So transference, so where you have those experiences. Go ahead, Joseph.
No, I want people, please share this with your friends and share this with your pastor. Everyone who's watching this, share it, please. I know we've got a couple people online watching now. It says we've got 10 or so watching. Please, everyone, share this. I'm gonna tell you why. Dad, Mike, and myself, raise your hand if you've ever had a letter written to the bishop about you.
I've had volumes written on me.
Dad, you have too, haven't you, Dad?
Yeah.
So
yes, a bishop as a pastor, yes.
So
as a pastor, I had them written at the secretary of my trustee board in Durham.
Church you got elected bishop from.
Wrote a letter to the bishop saying that I was too active in politics. I was bringing too many folk in the church and didn't need to be in the church. I was changing the church, had all these folk from the wrong areas coming in. I was the wrong kind of pastor for that church. The one good thing about it, the bishop that I had at that time disregarded that letter and never even mentioned it to me until much, much later. He didn't even consider it. He didn't even consider it. So now that's another point. The leadership of our church has to understand that folk who get mad do this don't take all the gripes as reality. You got folk who gripe all the time. Check it out and see it through. I've had letters since I've been a bishop written to me about folk who are to go. I wait and see what the folk are doing. I'm going to judge for myself. I'm not going to let them judge for me.
So I got to tell you, I got to say this. We're just being open and transparent today. I got sent. I got sent to Bethel AME Church in Ann Arbor. I was appointed there by Dad, and upon my being appointed there, it had been circulated that I was sent there against the pastor who was moved against their will, and they were forced out to force me in, which is not true because the pastor agreed and wanted to go to the church they were sent to, but it was told I was sent there and their person was forced out. So the people had some animus against me from the beginning. And even though it was my father who was the bishop that sent me to the church, they wrote a letter to him about me and signed it. I think like a handful of people, like 5 people signed it. But my first Sunday at the church, first Sunday after I preached my first sermon, one of my stewards, who's a dear friend of mine now, dear friend, she actually told me, she said, Pastor, I need you to know this is what they did. A letter was written. I wasn't part of it, but I don't want you to be blindsided. And so I waited for Dad to say something to me about the letter. He never said it. Finally, much, much later, I said, Dad, whatever happened to the letter that people sent about me? You know, who, by the way, I hadn't even been at the church. I'd never even stepped foot in the church before they sent the letter. And he said, well, I never told you about it because you had one letter that was saying you shouldn't be the pastor. He said, I can't count how many letters I received where people said they were happy to have you as the pastor.
Joe, let me tell you this. At that church I mentioned, the administrative for the bishop shared with me that when we finally got things settled, she said, I was praying for you, Reverend Cousin. I said, because of a letter? She said, it wasn't a letter, it was letters. Each week, a different letter would come in to the bishop's office, faxed in about you, about everything you were doing in the church over a 3-month period, every week. And even to have your name put in the black newspaper about you being sued and tearing up the church. And even to have on Christmas Eve to have them serve you with a summons that you were being sued. You know, that in itself can cause you.
What did the judge do with the suit? Tell him, Michael.
The judge threw it out for the fact that said, why are you even in here? Why are you doing this? You all are the church. And even the opposing attorney agreed with me and said, I don't know why I'm here. I'm just here representing these people. And the judge threw it out and said, this is ridiculous. And just threw the stuff out. But it was 2 years of having to deal with stuff to get to that point.
Yeah.
And to finally, but through it all, it was just one that's just, it took its toll. And so it gives us the other thing about why people, you know, you've got projection, you've got transference, and you also got blame shifting or grasping for control. When you come in as a visionary, they view you as a villain because they know there's a possibility they're going to lose control.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the wounds come. Daddy, I know you like to call it, you always got a resident pastor in every church.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The church always, they used to, they asked me, Bishop, who you gonna send them over? What we gonna do? We ain't got no pastor. I said, every church has a resident pastor. Every church has a resident pastor. Yeah. Someone who's been there for a long time, who thinks they know everybody, who thinks they know everything, and if you are careful, want to control everything. So I said, just watch out for your resident pastor, because that resident pastor is going to be there. And when you move that resident pastor, he or she, it ain't always a he. Sometimes it's a she. A lot of times it's a she. Who are resident pastors controlling what the flow of the life of the church happens to be. And usually it comes from 3 sources. Either come from the choir, either come from the missionary society.
I know the last one.
Or the lay organization.
Oh, you forgot one, Dad.
What's that?
The kitchen.
Oh yeah, or the kitchen, yeah, the kitchen crew.
The kitchen crew is rough sometimes.
So, but you know, I had to deal with all of them. I had a kitchen crew, I had a missionary society, I had a choir, I had a lay organization. Now, how you juggle them and hold them in line and keep them in line and keep them together, because sometimes they do great battle against themselves to see who's going to be the top at the list in running what happens in the church. You always got some folk, you know, I had one preacher that told me when I started pastoring a long time ago, he said, always watch out for the ones who rush up to you as soon as you get appointed.
Amen.
Say, keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open. So I said, all right, so why? So I said, he or she's trying to find out who you are and what you're doing. So I said, okay, fine. I'll try to remember that.
And see, that gets to a point where one of the pastors who just asked here, who do you go to? Who should you talk to? Within our culture, you're afraid to talk to anyone because you're leery of the friends you make, thinking, what do they want in return? How many times you've had a pastor to talk to your congregation saying, I hear he or she is not doing well if I was there. Well, how do you know this? Because he told me or she told me what's going on in there. And I think I could do a better job there. Oh, Joe, I see you shaking your head. Go ahead, Joseph.
No, I was going to say, that's why this is so sad, but that's why it's good to have friendships with people, if you can, who are, first of all, not in your denomination. And second,
or outside your vocation.
Well, and I was going to even say, if you have other pastor friends that are pastors, it's good to be outside your denomination and outside of your area where your church is, because denominational or not, they will try, persons will try to, what's the word, Mike? I always mess it up, proselytize. They will try to steal your votes.
Yes. I see people who watch and share it. If you got some questions, Joe is getting to them. Because I'm enjoying this. I see, hello, Reverend Savage, one of my young men over in St. John in Norfolk.
And Mike,
we've had some good conversations.
Rob,
And
Rob
John
is
and
watching
Wilder.
too, Mike. Rob is watching. Robert Wilder.
Rob is watching.
Yeah,
Rob,
Rob
a good
is
person. You
That's
know,
my man, my
Rob is like
roommate.
a brother.
My college roommate, yeah.
So it looks like this topic is taking on a life of its own. But I think with that whole thing of transfers, Daddy said a mouthful right there. Those persons who want to have control. They want to control the pastor, they want to control the life of the church, and they want to control the checkbook. You know, so and the checkbook meaning also what the pastor, the compensation is for the pastor. They don't consider all the things you go through. And so the hurts build up when you don't express it. And to express it is a sign, again, culturally, of weakness. As Merle Jordan tells us, you got to show your tender, vulnerable core. But in the Black church, you better not do that. Yeah, Joe.
No, here's one of the issues we deal with, and this is across the board. I was talking to someone the other day about this, and we were talking about a person who's a pastor who's having a difficult time in their church, and there's some issues popping up, and the pastor may have to seek another appointments, possibility or whatever. And we were just talking about it, having a conversation about it, and I said, man, what are you gonna do? Where you gonna, I wonder where if it happens, where this person is going to be sent or whatever. And my friend said to me, they said, well, here's the thing. Doesn't matter where they go, because until the behavior changes, you're always going to have the same problem. So you can put them in a new church, same behavior, same with churches. You can put a new pastor in a church. So church gets mad at the pastor. We're not going to pay our budget no more. Cool. Stop paying your budget. We're going to get you moved. They get you moved, send the new pastor in. If behavior hasn't changed, then how's the situation going to change? So how do we change behavior to change the situation?
That's the analogy of taking a bath or putting your dirty clothes back on.
Mm-hmm.
We wish to recognize one of our relatives, Dr. Dennis Dickerson. Thank you for watching with us.
Hey, Doc.
Daddy, you would often talk about that in terms of imperial checkers and Chinese checkers, dealing with pastors in that situation. With Chinese checkers, the difference being you can't take nobody off the board.
You can't. And that how we solve problems in the AME church is we always deal Chinese checkers. We move them from one slot to another, but sometimes they have to come off the board and go to a different slot entirely. But usually we just move them around, just shake them around, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. If you got a problem, moving to a different locale is not going to solve the problem. If the preacher's got a problem, if the church has a problem, bringing another preacher in ain't going to solve it until they work on it themselves.
And Dad, this is something that carries over, not just for church, but for anybody watching who's not a pastor in any situation. Until behavior changes, whether it's on your job, whether it's in your organization, whether it's in your family, whether it's in your household, you can change the locale or you can change the setting, but But if behavior doesn't change, you're gonna keep running into the same thing over and over and over.
And that's the thing where we have to address the behavior. I think these are the workshops that are coming up. And the first thing is admitting it's okay to say you're not okay, that you've had these experiences, to admit that you're wounded. The late Dr. Matt King Carter, pastor of Mount Olive in Fort Lauderdale, good friend, loved him dearly. Whenever I would see him in the parking lot, it was an hour gone because he would talk to me. And he would say things such as, cousin, if a pastor tell you who's at a church, he's never had a problem there, that pastor's lying. He said, because everybody, he said, hellions are like hounds. A hound would chase a rabbit. Don't matter if it's an orange rabbit, yellow rabbit, green rabbit. If it's a rabbit, it's going to chase it because it's just in that hound. He said, hellions are those problems those persons that always cause problems, but just love to chase preachers. It don't matter if it's Methodist, Baptist, Holiness, whatever. If it's a preacher, you know they got a problem with it. And so now I think that's one of the things that I realized, and the late Reverend Jethro Toomer, who pastored, I think, Shiloh back in Orlando, he said, cousin, the church is like a garden. From a distance, it looks beautiful. But when you get up on it, you're going to see rocks, you're going to see weeds and all the things you got to do to take care of it. Remember that. And I think that's one of the things to deal with these wounds, that there's going to be some toil, there's going to be some things, but the first thing is you got to admit that you got some wounds. And so now with that, in terms of the blame shifting, preachers get blamed for a lot of stuff. You ever been blamed for anything, Daddy?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, Lord. Moving stuff. They don't want to be moved. Changing stuff that don't want to be changed. How you going? When I built, it was the church in Durham. One of my good friends said, "Ain't no need to mess with him. He gonna do what he want to do anyhow." And I want a certain kind of carpet and a certain kind of pew. We ain't gonna have that because he ain't gonna let you do that. He ain't going. And I said that was the decision made by the board, but I get blamed for it because he ain't gonna change nothing at all. He ain't gonna change.
You said it was a friend, Daddy. You said it was a friend.
Yeah, it was a friend. Yeah.
You said that about that.
Yeah.
Well, don't feel bad, Dad. I've had the same thing said about me. They said, "Well, you're gonna do what you want to do anyway, so it don't matter." And the bottom line is, I think people just say that to you when they can't get their way. And that's the thing about it too. In church, it's funny. And I tell new pastors this all the time and new preachers this, people they'll love you until they don't. In other words, they'll love you until you make that first decision they don't agree with. First decision they don't agree with that you make, that love goes out the window.
Well, the thing is, with this blame giving, enemies serve at least two psychological purposes. The first is someone to blame, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, to try to bring cohesive, to bring the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So trying to galvanize support within the situation to bring allies into your cause. So we get blamed for a great deal of things, which means that adds to our hurt as preachers, as persons. And the sad thing of it is, it could seep over into the family of the pastor,
So,
yes.
So with that being said, then, as a pastor, I found it's beneficial, really, and maybe it's not helpful in some ways, but it's helpful in others, not really to share, if you can, how certain people feel about you in church with your family, because that's going to make your family not want to be a part of the church either. So then but you end up suffering.
You can't have official board in the church and in the parsonage too, no.
But you end up suffering in silence, Mike, a lot of times.
Well, I give an experience where when I live within the close proximity to the church, I was having an evening with my little sons and let them come outside in the yard. We didn't have much of a yard, but I would let them go out there, stretch their legs. And one of the men's groups who didn't like me came over to the fence and wanted to talk to me about their concerns. And I stopped them. I said, excuse me. On this side of the fence with my children, I'm daddy cousin. I'm spending time with them. Now, if you want me to go on the other side of the fence, you're going to get a different persona. I will address your concerns, but I hope that you will respect my space. That while I'm here, I'm with my children, and I'm letting them play. I'm watching them. I'm spending some time with them. But if you want to have me on that side, I will come. And what I'm saying, I don't know why you're being a coward. I said, excuse me. I put my children in the house. I said, excuse me. Now you called me on the other side of the fence. And I said, I think that's very disrespectful. First of all, you see me spending time with my family. Secondly, you use a name like that. If I said something like that about you, you'd be ready to fight. And so
Well,
you have to get to the point and just call it out for what it is. Whatever problem you have on your job, don't bring it to me. I'm not the person who calls that.
that's not my favorite story. Can you tell the PG version of my favorite story at your church when you were in the house and they need to get in the church? But you got to tell the PG version, Mike. Remember when you were in the house and somebody need to get in what they said?
When I was, this was in Cocoa, Florida. When I was doing some work we had propane tanks, but the propane tank to the parsonage, the gas would go out so quick, it'd be cold. So we wanted to put a new line in with another company. And so we contracted for the work to be done. But the company came and knocked on my door. And I said, well, I was in my room. It was early in the morning. And so one of the officers of the church lived not too far from the church, came up, wanted to know what was going on. And they were saying they need they were there to do this work. And I overheard him say, knock on the door, knock on the door. And they said, we knocked on the door. He said, knock on the door. That MF is in there. He knows he's in there. I got up out of the room. I said, wait a minute. I said, excuse me. Did I hear that correctly, what you called me? And you're an officer of this church? I said, I got to do a better job of vetting character and temperament. I don't think you do not have the qualities what it takes to be an officer in this church. If you use language like that first to refer to your pastor, and if you just use language like that in general, that tells me you got a problem. And so right then and there, to set those parameters up early in my ministerial career. I was 24 years old, and persons were saying that yeah, you can do all this, that, and the other, but that could, if you're not ready to address it, that could add to your frustration. And you're right, Joseph. That's some things we go through. We wonder why we need to talk about hurts when all of us have our own journeys and our own woes, that you just can't press it down. I think Daddy, when we moved to this house in Forestdale, we were happy when we saw a trash compactor. Yep. But the trash compactor turned out to be more of a problem than a solution because you pack stuff down so tight that it was hard to get it out. And so you just put stuff, you compact it, trash, you hit the button and put it in there, and then, all right, take it out. But you have to struggle to get it out because it's been compacted. And I think that's what a lot of us are going through now. What you say about that, Daddy? About holding stuff back?
Well, a lot of times the pastor will receive a lot of the insults and the verbal abuse from members who have difficulty dealing with other situations that they may have in their home, on their job, or somewhere else. And they bring it, and they just remember. Now remember, in our culture, as we grew up, the church was the thing which provided an opportunity for leadership and for activity and for control.
Mhm.
And you got to be a big person if you could be at the top of the heap, controlling, understanding, and moving things the way you want them to go. And anytime someone comes in who questions what you're doing, you get a big problem. You see it as bishop, as a bishop. People think bishops are easy. You follow one bishop who had been doing something one way, and you come in and try to think about it, and the folk who've been around them doing what that other bishop said, they're gonna be the ones. What you say about the hellhounds? They the hellhounds who chasing on you because you changing what they've been doing over the years.
Yep.
And that it's just I hate to think in the 4th district when I came here, first thing I wanted to do was to have a Founders Day program for the district. I didn't get nothing, didn't hear nothing underneath. But they didn't want that because they'd never had that with another bishop. So when this bishop left, they went back to having each local church have their own Founders Day. That's because they were in their way, in their mold, and didn't want to come into the unity of having a district instead of separate little congregations.
Yep.
So that shows right there in terms of control. And really, as I've heard the old saying, the only person looking forward to change is a wet baby.
Wet baby.
So that's what which adds to our frustration of wounds. I think now with the grants being written, I think pastors understanding it's not a sin, nor should it be shameful to admit that you would benefit from a vacation or benefit from attending those seminars, help you talk about your hurts and your pains. A therapist. I've been blessed in the sense that I have brothers, I have a father, I have relatives who are pastors, who were able to come and talk about this and help us to see things and work things through. Not everybody's blessed with that. Not everybody's blessed with that, but to show that there's a blessing when you learn to talk about these things. When you talk about it, you're really admitting that it's real.
Yep.
That it's real. And so,
Our nephew Joel said that, Mike. Tim posted it yesterday. Joel said, he said it's okay to not be okay, but what's not okay is to not be okay and admit you're not okay.
And that's one of the things that you have to open up to. You have, think about it. Every week you got somebody beating up on you. Either they're gonna send you an irate
Been there.
Email, text message. As Daddy stated, I'm mad at the church. Why are you mad at the church? Because you didn't come see me in the hospital. Sometimes you didn't even know they're there.
Sometimes, most times you don't know.
Somebody, well, I was sick and nobody called me. Wait a minute, people did call you, but no, they want the pastor to call you. When there are things, have you ever considered that the pastor has situations they're dealing with? Recently with the passing of our loved one, I would think persons to be calling and saying, how are you doing, Reverend? But I can count on my hand how many people call to say that. But you don't see me up in arms or holding back or being confrontational with people. Let me go one step more. When I was in the hospital some years ago, I was in intensive care. How many members came to see me? I can count on my hand how many. But that doesn't kill my joy, because I'm thankful and I have family to help me with this. And so the wounds that are there, how you deal with the wounds? Well, you got to recognize you're wounded. And let's just say our time, we only got 4 minutes left. I didn't even get to the solutions. Is it all right if we continue this next week or maybe just
Yeah. Well, and next week, I do want to continue this. That'd be fine. And we could talk a little bit next week too, as we talk about solutions, because one of those solutions I'm sure has to do with some kind of behavioral change.
Yes, one of the solutions is that finding your group,
So that's good, because what I want to talk about next week, which is perfect right there, Mike. One of the things is I want us to touch on the finding group and dealing with what's going on in the NBA world with the suspension of Ja Morant for holding the gun up on Instagram, which is clearly an indication of just surrounding yourself with the wrong group.
Well,
Is he going to play? Is he going to play tonight?
He's got a 4-game suspension. He's bright young man with a very bright future. Very talented young man, very, very intelligent young man. Just, made a bad decision at that time.
And
somebody told me he's an AME.
Is he? From all I hear, everything I hear is a great young man.
He comes from, he has opportunity, the thing is the influences that are around him. And just take it one step further, Joseph, and not just with Ja Morant, but the misfortune of the 4-person who went over to Mexico.
And
that highlights things.
Yeah.
That highlights 2 things. Healthcare in this country costs. They're going for, they believe, cosmetic surgery. But secondly, the ideals, those things we've adopted in terms of beauty, which will put us in harm's way. Acceptance, being able to accept yourself for what you are, for who you are. Beauty comes from within. And, the superficial things that we put our trust in, they're making money off of our own wants to be like everybody else and just be who you are. I think the late 60s, early 70s helped us with that, with identity. Being thankful, proud, because you know who you are, and in your own right, you've got your own self-confidence. So I think that helps us lead into next week in terms of solutions for how to deal with these hurts, solutions for those wounds, how to heal those wounds. I thought, thank you so much for those who joined us today.
Thank you.
For this conversation. We will follow up next week. Share it with your friends. I will close out, and Joe, you would go, and then Daddy. I want to thank you all for this. You see in the background a scene that lets us know the tranquil setting of a vacation. I appreciate my younger brother who pushes that among his brothers to take a moment for yourself. Find the time to take a vacation. Find the time to take a day off to do nothing, to just decompress and prepare yourself. It's hard for God to use you. I say God can't use you. It's just difficult when you are broken yourself. So admit that each and every day, take time to replenish. I think our father said this, and his father shared with him, always replenish your barrel. It would be educationally, spiritually. Always fill your barrel. In other words, make sure you're constantly putting in, because you're not putting in and relying upon that which is there. When you get to the bottom, you get to the brackish water, that which has been sitting and stale and stagnant, but it cannot replenish you as quickly as the fresh that comes in, and to keep it from becoming stagnant. So don't allow yourself to be stagnant educationally, spiritually, or physically. Always replenish your barrel. Go ahead, Joe.
Just want to thank everybody for all of their support during this season, and for all of their encouragement and just the prayers and everything, as Michael talked about earlier, dealing with the loss of our nephew. And please keep his mom and dad especially in prayer, Reverend Stephen and Sister Linda Cousin, as well as the entirety of our family in your prayers. And we just thank you for your support, and take some time to care for yourself, to have some self-care, to enjoy yourself. Talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and we went out to lunch and had a good time. And I was like, what you gonna do the rest of the day? He said, today is Self-Care Wednesday. He said, so I'm having lunch with you. When I leave having lunch with you, I got to go do something for myself. I'm going to go watch Creed 3 in the afternoon. I'm going to enjoy myself because this is Self-Care Wednesday. Every Wednesday is Self-Care Wednesday. And I like that. I said, that's a good idea. So take a self-care day, take a day to enjoy yourself and relax. And most of all, just remember, don't take yourself too seriously. Enjoy yourself, take time for yourself, and you'll find that God will allow you to be much more productive in all that you do. Dad?
Well, I'm thankful that we are discussing some of the problems that have been weighing on our minds for a long time as pastors. You can't put everything on your back, because if you do, your back will break and your congregation will be broken because you've tried to carry too many things, too many anxious moments, too many hurts without giving some relief. You can't fill up your balloon of memory with so much and not expect it to break if you keep on putting problems inside. So I'm delighted that we are finally getting to the point where the other culture has been dealing with sabbaticals, dealing with vacations as a regular thing, and a need for pastors and a need for churches. The church may need a vacation from their pastor. The pastor may need a vacation from the church. Both need a vacation. Don't fight the fact that you might need some relief, either church or preacher. That's normal. The bad part is to let it keep beating on you and soon to change your whole mentality and change the whole direction in which you're going and in which your church is going. So we thank God for giving us the strength to see and understand the problems that are around us. We have to deal with them. Problems don't go away until you confront them. Right. Problems will not leave until you confront them. So let us continue to confront the problems which have been there as it relates to our health, our mental capacities, and our ability to withstand all the difficulties that pastoral ministry and church management and church membership is all involved in the same boat. So thank you, Lord, for this day. Give us strength, give us comfort, give us wisdom, give us focus, and keep us in your way. In Jesus' name, amen.